Hello, everyone. Here we are again. Some folks emailing me about the live and asking for a link. So let me just reply to that. So we're going to do a quick one today. Yes, we are on today, Matt. It's going to be a quick one. So I'm here mostly for questions and answers. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. And we'll go for about 15 minutes today. I'll have to change the day and time of the lives because I'm doing a course over the next couple of months on Mondays. And so we're going to have to adjust the time of the lives, unfortunately. So if you have a question, feel free to post the question in the chat. And I will get to you. And I got new equipment, but I haven't figured out the lighting yet. So it's a little weird today. We'll figure out as we go, as we continue to do this. I have to play with it a little bit more. So yeah, what's happening for you in your IFS world? What are you struggling with, or what questions do you have about IFS? While I wait for that, one thing that I keep talking about, but I keep seeing how essential it is just the ability that we need to have to help our clients learn how to unblend from parts. And it's a fine skill to develop, because oftentimes we'll be in a session with a client and it's very easy to get into a parts relationship, right? Where a part of them brings up a part in us, and there we are, right? So an example is, let's say the client is a little bit insecure and they ask you for your advice, and you might go into advice mode, right? And so a part of you picks up the request for advice, and then you start giving advice. And so now you're blended with the part and the client is blended with the part, and being able to say, oh, so this part of you that's asking me for advice, how come? What is it hoping to get out of this? And what's going to happen inside if it gets the advice? And what's the history, right? What does that part remember about maybe not having support around making decisions, or having the ability to make their own decisions? So just keep looking at that, how much we can really take a step back and help the client notice the parts that they're blended with. Michael says, I am trying to do a training on IFS in young adults. Is the self related to the neocortex? That's a good question, Michael. Is the self related to the neocortex? I think insight pretty much is, right? Insight and the perspective that we have with insight, the ability to notice something but not be blended with it, not be in a state, that's definitely something that we would be associating with the neocortex. But is self itself? That's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer for you. I don't know if I actually know what self, metaphysically speaking, really is. Is self an emergent property of all of our parts when they come together? And so is it like the sum of, or something that shows up when a lot of little intelligent beings come together and do something greater? Is it something spiritual that's beyond the existence of individual intelligences? But that's a great question. So I don't know. Maybe you could be more specific, Michael, but I don't know if I can actually give you an answer about that. Yeah, any other questions or anything else? And just for the folks that just joined us, this is going to be a quick one today. I have to leave in about 10 minutes now. And we're going to have to be switching the time that we're doing these. And we're going to be meeting. Let me look at my calendar. We're going to be meeting tomorrow again at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we're going to do a longer one. And so Michael says, would an adolescent with impulsiveness be seen as not accessing self as easily? Sure. Yeah. I mean, you could say that. Again, human beings are complex, right? So impulsiveness, what is it? Is it just a part that is blended? Is it like some type of firefighter? It could be. Could it be something else more complex? That too. But so if this adolescent doesn't think through things and just impulsively does things, it could be that there is some part that is responding quickly to something for some reason, right? So we would want to get curious about that and see if there's a part, maybe a firefighter, that is doing that. The only way to know for sure is in that individual case if we ask the question, right? That's why there's a lot of resistance in the IFS world with creating too many maps that tell you how things are, because the way things are for one person is not necessarily the same that they are for another person, although we see a lot of patterns that repeat. But the only way to really know is to ask this teenager, hey, can you turn towards that impulsiveness and tell me more about how it shows up, right? So let's see if we can make you be impulsive right here, right now, and so you can get clear about what that feels like. And then as you get clear about that, can you turn towards that and ask that part of you what it's concerned would happen if it didn't do that, right? And then if we get an answer about that, then maybe we can get clear about whether it's a part and if it has a job and how come it's doing that. Bob says, I find that some clients, more likely to be older males, identify the age of parts as earlier in their lives, but often adolescents or their 20s and rarely as early childhood. So Bob, let me see if I understand what you're saying. Clients, especially older males, identify the age of the part as earlier in their lives, often adolescents or in their 20s, but rarely as early childhood. Okay, so that's very common. And for some clients, it takes a while working with them until they can really have access to earlier stuff, especially if there's been a lot of trauma or emotional neglect. There are parts whose job it is to keep a wall of forgetfulness. And so that lack of access just tells you where you are in the process, not so much what types of parts they really have in their system. Everybody's going to have baby parts. Everybody's going to have toddler parts. Everybody's going to have like learning how to walk and explore the world parts. Everybody's going to have, going to school for the first time and adventuring into the world for the first time, etc. parts, right? So all of these stages of life, we're all going to have parts in all of those stages, but whether we have access to them or not really depends on how much our protectors are needing to keep that period of our lives blocked off from memory. And when there's a lot of emotional neglect, that often happens, but also when there's a lot of abuse, right? And so that could just mean that it might take longer for you to go to those earlier parts with that client. But sometimes it's also, as you're staying with the 20-year-old part, you could ask that part, hey, does this feel like it started then, or does this feel like an earlier thing? What's the earliest memory that you have about feeling this way, right? And sometimes just fishing for something earlier, we can go back to even like pre-verbal parts. But just stay curious. Sometimes teenage years, early 20s is where the work is for right now. And then later, pre-verbal parts is all the work for a while. So you really have to follow the client system and see what that system needs right now and what it's ready for. Don't know if that makes sense to you, Bob. Michael says, the compassion of the self seems more than just the neocortex. I want to explain to educators some basic understandings of recognizing parts like qualities in self, like qualities in students. You're right about that, Michael. So is compassion, equanimity, loving kindness, are those qualities of the neocortex? I don't know. They seem to be, to me, more transcendental qualities that go beyond this understanding that we have of the brain, right? Because one thing is to understand the brain and the different sections of the brain and the functions that it has. But there are some of these things that seem to be much more complex and go way beyond any of this scientific language that we have, that we get from neuroscience. So, I mean, maybe you are the one creating the problem for yourself, wanting to connect it to parts of the brain. Maybe you could just talk about self and those transcendental qualities and how they show up and how they're useful, right? So see what your goal is by connecting it to neuroscience when you're doing that explanation there. Thank you for the opportunity. I am new to IFS. Jacques Lorzal says, thank you for the opportunity. I'm new to IFS. Can you speak to helping clients with unblending from protectors? I am concerned about staying in curiosity and not becoming a debate. Okay, it's very sensitive, Jacques. And it's a skill that you learn over time, right? So number one, I want to assess, is my client ready for me to invite them to notice a part and bring it out a little bit more, and invite the client to do a U-turn, basically, right? Hey, are you? So many ways that we can do this. We say, are you noticing this? Let's an example. So I might say, client, tell me how it does this for you, but it feels like you're doing all the work alone right now. It's like you're inside and you're trying to organize things, and it almost feels like there's a little bit of a distance between you and I. Are you noticing that? And the client might say, yeah, well, I have to. Well, okay, so there's a part of you that says I have to do this. Maybe it's like a little self-reliant. Are you noticing it as a part, or does this feel like this is my truth right now? Right, so when I do that either or, are you noticing it as a part, or does it feel like this is how I really am, or this feels true to me right now? I'm checking how blended the client is. And if they say, yeah, I can notice it as a part. Okay, so what else are you noticing about it? Now, but if the client says, no, it's obviously I have to figure this out because, I mean, in the other session, I said something and you didn't really get it, right? So now the client is upset at me and saying like, you don't understand me. So the client is fully blended with the part. So if that's the case, then I'm going to back off on doing the insight and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. If you've said something to me before and you felt like it didn't really get you, of course you would feel like you had to do things alone right now. What is that like for you to be here with me right now, but feeling like you have to do it alone? You have to figure it out. I imagine it's kind of lonely. Am I getting that right? So I'm moving to implicit direct access. And I'm going to be doing that for a while until it feels like there's enough of unblending. Oh, now the client's starting to feel connected to me again. Oh, he gets me, etc. I say, okay. So client, it feels like there's more of a connection between us now. You noticing that? Yeah. Okay, great. So sometimes something happens in your system that there is a sense of disconnection and needing to be self-reliant, you needing to do alone, and now it's feeling like there's more of a connection. Can we get curious about what happens there that creates this disconnection and like I need to do it alone? Are you curious about that? Do you want to look at that? Right, so we can move in and out, back and forth like that. So that's just an example, right? This is a much more complex subject, but that's just a little bit for you. So see how that lands for you, Jacques. Matt says, can memory, especially early memory, be not vivid or accessible at all because things were smooth sailing, comfortable, some strong emotional connections, moments, but in general, nothing got stuck? Matt, yes. Yes. But I haven't met that person yet that has had such an amazing luck in life that no moments created burdens, right? I'll just give you an example. Let's say you have wonderful parents, right? They're super attuned to you. They love and care for you. They are very mature, so they somehow did a lot of their personal work before they had you. They had money enough that they didn't have to work too much, and they were dedicated on focusing on you and your development, but they knew to give you space for you to develop. So they were wonderful caregivers, right? Now imagine one day you're a little baby, you see very dependent on your mother. Family relatives come to visit. One of them has the flu. She gets the flu, becomes sick. So for 2-3 days, she can barely function. And you're noticing this. Mom is sick and barely function. And she goes to the toilet, right? And she's maybe puking and she has a big stomach ache. And you're in the bedroom and you just hear something. You don't know exactly what it is. You're a little baby, right? And maybe your father's there with you and he's taking care of you, but you're missing mom. So it doesn't matter how great our parents are. There will be moments where something is going to happen that will generate some kind of burden, right? There will be something, some aspect of it. So I don't think there is such a thing as like someone that had such a great upbringing where it's just like smooth sailing. Actually, oftentimes when a client comes and says, my childhood was wonderful, my parents were amazing, I'm like, oh, okay. So we are really talking about a good level of emotional neglect, huh? Well, I don't say this to the client, but I know that's what it is, because the only people that come and tell me that their childhoods were great were the ones that had a lot of emotional neglect or abuse in their childhoods. Now, the folks that are securely attached, they had great upbringing, they got lucky, they come and they say, these things were wonderful, those things were not so great, and they can have a balanced view of things. Now that tells me that's a really strong, secure upbringing. When a person can come and say, this was great, this is not so great. Oh, I was really sad when that happened. Okay, so that's my sense, right? So that would be my answer to you, Matt. Les, hey Les, hello. Bob replying to Met, along with the possibility that everyone has some negative experiences, burdens, it is also true that great upbringing should include vivid memories of delight experiences. Yeah, true, right? So when we have a great upbringing, we will have very meaningful experiences that we will remember, right? So there will be things to remember for sure, and we can go there and remember that. So I think I said enough about that subject, but it's a great question. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for coming. I do have to go now, but I'm going to be here again tomorrow at 6 p.m. So if you can make that time and you want to come back and you have more questions, feel free to do that. If you have questions, you can send it to my email, gustavo.alps@gmail.com. And Les says, I see you, IFSCA, as the only IFS-infused organization, for lack of a better term, to actually delve into parts in our inner system related to resources, money. How come it's this way? Oh, God, great question. I won't have time to answer that now, Les, but please bring that tomorrow or send me a more detailed question to my email, and I will get to you, okay? All right. Thanks for showing up, everyone. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.